Good afternoon and welcome to Politics in the Pulpit here on your hometown station, 98.1 FM and AM 1220. We've got a great show on tap for you today. If you are just tuning in today, we're going to be joined in just a few moments by State Senator Shannon Grove, who of course is the author of that child sex trafficking bill that was finally adopted, but of course had some major run-ins by 6 Democrats and maybe a couple of Republican holdovers. And so we definitely are excited about talking to her, and she'll be calling in just a few moments. Just a couple of quick shameless plugs. If you're looking for a good church to attend, I encourage you to attend Freedom's Way Baptist Church. We've been here for 21 years. I encourage you to look at freedomswaybaptistchurch.org and to catch us online and check out Freedom's Way Baptist Church YouTube, and you can see all the sermons as well, just to kind of know what you're going to get into. If you're looking for a school for your kid, we're K4, K5, and first grade. Lighthouse Christian Academy might be your choice. It's a school where we educate but do not indoctrinate. So we encourage you to give Lighthouse Christian Academy a call, and you can find that information online as well through freedomswaybaptistchurch.org. Well, as everyone's going on and on about the Hunter Biden story, as well as Devin Archer's testimony from yesterday, and all the other things that are happening in the world, according to the news media, obviously the indictment of the former president yesterday with Jack Smith. Some of you probably didn't know that Fitch downgraded the U.S. debt on debt ceiling drama and January 6th insurrection. You say, what do you mean by that? Well, Fitch Ratings downgraded its U.S. debt rating on Tuesday from the highest AAA rating to AA, citing a, quote, steady deterioration in standards of governance. The downgrade comes after lawmakers negotiated up until the last minute on a debt ceiling deal earlier this year, risking the nation's first default. And then, of course, CNN goes on to talk about how the January 6th insurrection was also a major contributing factor. Of course, we know that Fitch Ratings is along with Moody's and others. And if you remember back in the Obama days, Moody's actually downgraded our rating as well from AAA down to AA. And so here we have this happening under Biden. And, of course, we know that the administration strongly disagrees with the Fitch Ratings decision here to downgrade our debt. It says, quote, this is from Janet Yellen, who of course is with the Biden administration, says, I strongly disagree with the Fitch Ratings decision, said Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen in a statement on Tuesday. The change by Fitch Ratings announced Tuesday is arbitrary and based on outdated data. So what does this really mean for you out there? It means that everything's going to go up in pricing. You say what? Like your credit cards, all that kind of stuff. It's just going to get harder and harder and harder now that we've been downgraded by such a austere group as Fitch. And of course, that was happening while the Devin Archer stuff was occurring and all kinds of other things was coming out for President Biden. Yesterday, of course, the big news was the indictment of former President Trump, not just the indictments that have already happened, but the federal indictments by Special Counsel Jack Smith. Now, if you're still trying to follow this whole thing, I'll give you two things. Number one, it is hard to follow. Number two, there are 2 law professors that I would encourage you to consider listening because they tend to be pretty much straight down the middle. And the 2 law professors that I believe you should give special attention to in reference to these indictments is Jonathan Turley and Andy McCarthy. And both of them essentially rip apart the special counsel's indictment here. This was yesterday on Fox News. Brett Baer shared how Republicans are describing the indictment for what it is. Democrats looking at a box of chocolates, trying to figure out what was the best of the chocolates to prevent him from becoming president again. And then you've got George Washington law professor Jonathan Turley decimates how weak this latest effort was from special counsel Jack Smith. Turley argued that what Baer said was, quote, I think that the indictment does not have this compelling level of evidence. Turley also ripped into Attorney General Merrick Garland and his statement on the matter, saying that he's acting like a pedestrian rather than truly looking at the case and saying, hey, wait, Is this all you have? Turley goes on to say that this was stretching the law, which, by the way, is something that Jack Smith has been blamed of doing, especially with the McDonald case from Virginia, and it was an indictment that didn't say enough. So all I can tell you is this. If Jonathan Turley and Andy McCarthy both think this is a flawed indictment, then all I can tell you is this is something to look into as we go forward on this whole thing. Because this is either going to be a noose around the neck of the former president, or, as we're seeing in many, many polls, just an acceleration of his candidacy leading into the debate here in the middle of August, and then, of course, into the early primaries in Iowa and some of the other Midwestern states. So it doesn't matter to me. All I can tell you is it seems to me that all that it's doing is simply making things look better for former President Trump. Now, I wonder if the Republicans who aren't Trump supporters, who want anybody but Trump, and again, I'm not necessarily saying who I want or do not want, but what if we end up getting a candidate like a Mike Pence or a someone like Chris Christie? What would that do to the enthusiasm of the Republican Party as a whole? Chris Christie is, by all effects, basically a moderate, and Mike Pence doesn't seem to have the tenacity and the panache, if you will, of a Donald Trump. So what if the Republican Party ends up nominating one of those kinds of Republicans next year? Well, let me tell you what's going to happen. Those Trump Republicans are going to sit it out. And when those Trump Republicans sit it out, we're talking like well over a third of the Republican Party. This means that the Democrats will win with whomever candidate ends up running in 2024. And of course, I kind of insinuated last Wednesday that I have my doubts that Biden will be the nominee next year. It's possible that he might be, but I have my major doubts that he is going to be the candidate for 2024. All I can tell you is that if a third or a little more than a third of the Republican Party sit it out and decide not to vote for anybody, that is ostensibly going to guarantee that the Democrat is going to win a second term, whether it's the second term of the Biden presidency or it's the second term of somebody like Gavin Newsom. It's not going to be Kamala, but Gavin Newsom or somebody like that, because the Republicans as a whole haven't figured out this whole Trump conundrum. Just giving us a Republican candidate is not enough for these Trump Republicans. And the Republican Party better figure out how they're going to do this. Now, if you were to ask me, and I'm not a betting man, but I will say that Vivek Ramaswamy, that's a name that's really complicated to say, but seems to be making the best inroads in terms of a dark horse candidate. And some of the things I've heard him say, the fact that he's kind of Trump neutral when it comes to criticism, I really think he's playing this thing really, really well. And if you were to ask me, I think he would be the heir apparent if something were to happen to former President Trump that would keep him from running or being able to be the nominee for the Republican Party. I think a guy like Vivek Ramaswamy would be somebody that I think Trump candidates and Trump supporters wouldn't mind backing. Now you say why? Well, number one, he's this anti-woke candidate. He wrote a whole book on this, Woke Incorporated, a couple years ago. Number two, he's young. He's 37 years old. He's a millennial, and it's very rare to see that somebody that young, this conservative. I don't mind him. I've seen a lot of millennials that are moderate and maybe left of center, but Vivek seems to be right of center. And also, he has a great compelling story having parents that came from India and, came here and pursued the American dream. And Vivek, I think, has a compelling story. The other Republicans in the race, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, even though Tim Scott does have a relatively compelling story, Mike Pence, Chris Christie, and the former governor of Arkansas, Asa Hutchinson, even Larry Elder to a certain extent, Doug Burgum from North Dakota. These guys just don't excite the base. They just don't. And the only two that I can see right now in the immediate is, of course, former President Donald Trump and Vivek Ramaswamy, who is gaining more and more traction. In fact, in some polls, he is running third, and I think in one or two polls he might be running second to Donald Trump, and is actually pushing DeSantis in the third spot in certain places. So there is no doubt that he is a rising star within the party, even if he doesn't get the nomination or he doesn't get any kind of nod from Trump in 2024. He is definitely a force to be reckoned with going forward into 2025, 2026, and 2027. Also, I think that Vivek is also one of these guys that is able to articulate the conservative anti-woke agenda in a very succinct, professional, and polished manner. If there's one thing we can all say about Trump is we definitely know what he's thinking because he's saying it, but he doesn't always say it very well. Whereas I think that Vivek essentially holds to the same things that President Trump holds to, but does so and is able to communicate them in a way that is very, very effective, and I think will be a decent alternative should something occur with former President Trump. And again, I'm not suggesting that something should occur, but just in case, it's always good to make sure that the Republican Party are thinking downstream as opposed to being a reactionary when it comes to President Trump. Also, what is happening with President Biden? It seems that things are kind of slowly trickling out about the president and whether or not he took bribes, whether or not he had business dealings with his son Hunter Biden. We know that in 2019 and 2020, President Biden was very, very clear about saying unequivocally that he had nothing to do with the business dealings of his son. But now, of course, news is trickling out. And if you noticed a week ago, the White House press secretary kind of changed her language and terminology and said something to the extent of the president has never been in business with his son, So that's different language. That's not what President Biden said on the campaign trail in 2019 and 2020. And because news is starting to drip out about more and more of involvement that Biden had with his son Hunter, that now the language has got to be tightened and changed as they go forward, because they realize that now, because of Devin Archer's testimony from yesterday, that President Biden was on the phone many times listening in to the conversations that Hunter was having with Burisma officials and others from around the world. And you say, what do you call that? Well, you call that influence peddling. You're essentially saying, hey, listen, hire me, pay me this amount of money, and if you hire me, you get my father and the influence of the vice presidency, which he was at the time. And so that's influence peddling. Now, where does it come into criminality for President Biden? If, in fact, he took bribes, if, in fact, he actually took money and money was exchanged. And the way to prove this is to figure out if we can actually have a special counsel. There is no special counsel at the moment looking into all these. All the special counsel seems to be preoccupied with former President Trump at the moment. But why won't Department of Justice, Merrick Garland, just have a special counsel on this issue? The reason why is because they know that they cannot be impartial and that things are just going to slowly start dripping out faster and faster. My theory going into the end of this year, we are now August 2nd, I really think that the mainstream media is slowly going to turn on former President, not former President Trump, but President Biden. Why? Because his usefulness to their cause and to the narrative is not going to be effective anymore. And because his usefulness will have run its course, they're going to slowly, and I already see it happening, they're going to slowly throw him under the bus, and we are going to see a possibility of sliding in Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, to somehow take over that position, perhaps maybe to fulfill the term of President Biden. Because again, I do not believe the Democrats want Kamala Harris anywhere near the presidency. No matter what the average Democrat out there thinks of Kamala Harris, the man on the street type of interview thinks of Kamala Harris, the party apparatus of the Democratic Party does not like Kamala Harris. They believe that she is a detriment to everything. Not only that, she can't really communicate effectively either. Her word salads are going to be talked about for years and years and years to come. When we come back here on Politics in the Pulpit, Lord willing, we'll be joined by State Senator Shannon Grove, and we'll be talking about child sex trafficking and what is happening in our state here of California when we come back here on your hometown station. Well, we have on the line with us this afternoon Senator Shannon Grove. Shannon Grove was raised right here in California, in Kern County, where she is representing. She served in the U.S. Army. She's the first woman veteran elected to the California legislature. Shannon was also the leader of the Senate Republican caucus, and more importantly, she's the proud mother of 5 children and grandmother of 8 grandchildren. Senator Grove, thank you for coming on the show today.
Hey, Pastor Jerry. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad that you stuck with us here during all that waiting time. Consider it calling the IRS or the DMV.
I thought the information you were giving out to the listeners was very good information and very well balanced.
Well, very good. I appreciate that. Let's just start off with a testimony, if you don't mind, Shannon. Give us a little bit of your background in terms of your faith in Christ and how much of that influences your thinking, especially when it comes to politics.
Well, absolutely. So, my mom was a single mom, and she raised all 5 of us kids. My dad left when I was very young. And she raised us at an Assemblies of God church in Arvin, California, with Pastor Palm. Made sure that we were all were taught God's word and how to pray. And then we moved to Bakersfield or Lamont. And then I moved to Bakersfield. I followed my faith to Canyon Hills Assembly of God. I carried that faith with me when I felt like the Lord called me into the military when I went overseas in Germany. We've raised our family in it. And I can tell you that when politics came around, I had no desire. I wasn't looking for politics. When politics came looking for me, when the suggestion came up for me to run for an office, I prayed about it. I got one of my dearest friends, and we fasted for 30 days. And we felt like the Lord was really giving me Jeremiah 33:3 because of my background. I thought, I'm not college educated. I don't have this experience. I've never been in politics before. And the Lord kept telling me, call on me and I'll answer you and give you great unsearchable things you do not know. So I've called on him and he's responded, and he's bigger than anything that I face in the Capitol.
Well, amen to that. I want to just read a quick story to you. This is via Hot Air. It's captioned, "It must be a QAnon conspiracy theory." And it goes like this. The FBI just announced that they have arrested dozens of human traffickers and rescued more than 200 victims, including 59 missing children. That's 59 missing children. And this, of course, just happened yesterday. And actually, this news is from today, but it happened yesterday. And I'm just amazed that when this whole thing about Voice of Freedom, the movie, and, of course, your bill, SB 14, the initial reaction of the media was, it's just a QAnon conspiracy. Well, Is it a QAnon conspiracy that 59 children were missing but now are found?
It's not a QAnon conspiracy. We had a senator that's elected, duly elected, one of 40 in the state of California, post that on his Twitter or X page now, saying that it was QAnon, the conspiracy theory, and that we were using this bill to further that opinion. It's not. I can tell you that the witness that I had that came to testify as my lead witness was trafficked as a minor child at 7 years old and had several so-called quote-unquote uncles that paid to have sex with her from the age of 7 to 14. I can tell you that Jenna McKay's story, where she was brought out of a Christian college in Southern California. She was brought out of a Christian college in Southern California with someone that she thought she loved and that loved her, and within just a short time frame of dating, she went out of town with him, and it took her almost a year to get back because he trafficked her in that other town. I can tell you that my sheriff in Tulare County did a baby face operation and busted 114 individuals, and out of that rescued 16 individuals. The youngest was 10 years old. Human trafficking exists in California. It's real, and this state does not consider it a serious felony to sell a child for sex.
Now, I'm not asking you to get into the minds of some of your Democratic colleagues here in the state of California in particular, but are they suggesting, or at least the way I'm reading a lot of what I'm seeing, is it seems as if maybe they either don't believe that child sex trafficking is a big deal, or that we're making too big a deal of it. Which is it?
So I can't get into the minds of my Democrat colleagues who actually killed the bill, and then again, my Jesus, 24 hours or 48 hours later, the same people that killed the bill passed the bill. Mm-hmm. But the excuses they use are overcrowding in prison, disproportionately affecting Black and brown communities, and having stronger prison sentences. They don't like the 3 strikes law. I understand that they don't like 3 strikes. But I think that anybody, whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, or no party preference, you can agree that there should be an exception to the 3 strikes rule for people that sell children for sex.
Yeah, I think so too. And what do you think initially brought those 6 Democrats back around to vote for the bill?
So, to be honest with you, we prayed through this whole process. We prayed before votes, after votes, before committee, after committee, before meetings, after meetings. It was a continuous prayer process through this whole ordeal because we work with survivors. Mm-hmm. And to have survivors, think that it's a common sense bill, which it is, and believe that there's no reason why anybody would hear their horrific stories about being branded, about being beaten, about being sold, about being gang raped, about a mother finding out that after her daughter was missing, they found out she was being trafficked from a video of grown men raping her daughter. The survivors of this horrific ordeal were like, they're going to hear our story, and there's no way they can say no to this bill. They're going to hear our story. And so I can tell you that the hardest part of this bill was to work with the survivors and let them be let down by our Democrat colleagues in the Public Safety Committee. I can tell you that it was totally a move of the Lord. I really do believe that. I also know that only, somebody said something, and I was halfway joking, but not really joking when I said only my Jesus could take a dead Republican bill in a majority Democrat-controlled Public Safety Committee in the state of California. That bill was dead in 48 hours. The governor, the media, and everybody's involved, and that bill is turned around and passes and goes to appropriations with no amendments, as is the day they killed it.
Yeah, that's a praise the Lord moment, and it just so happened to coincide, we wouldn't say ironically, but we would say providentially, with the release of that movie Voice of Freedom.
You're so right. Republicans being in the super minority in the state of California, we don't set the agenda. So we've wanted this bill to be heard. We've advocated for this bill to be heard. We wait and wait and wait and wait and wait on a committee hearing. And then the Democrats notify us and say it's going to be this day. And it just happened to be a few days after The Sound of Freedom was released, and there was national attention brought forth with Jen Caviezel and Tim Ballard and what was going on there. And that's totally a providential timing. Like it's what God did.
Yeah.
It's a timing issue.
Have you had a chance to speak to Tim Ballard about his experience, other than, of course, what we've seen in the movie? And why do you think the mainstream media has basically poo-pooed not only the movie, but it seems like by extension the actual crime that's being committed, which is child sex trafficking?
So I have not had the opportunity to speak to Tim Ballard. I know that he does follow us on social media because he was working with my communications person or his team or someone that he's connected to, and they would retweet and comment on our updates on SB 14. The same with Elon Musk. He engaged in the process in a different way than the faith community did, in a different way than Sound of Freedom did, but he still engaged, which created an exposure to what was happening in that building in Sacramento, so that people could be aware that, a common sense bill, taking all the amendments that we did to get it out of the Senate, and it got out of the Senate with a 40-0 vote on consent and no opposition. And when it got to the assembly, it dies, and it was just a shock to everyone that selling a child for sex is not considered a serious felony. Now, the argument is that it is a serious felony on a fallback. Let me explain that. The fallback is it's not the selling the child for sex or trafficking the child that's the serious felony. It's if you maim them, beat them, torture them, coerce them. It's all of those things. I just simply want the act of selling that child to be the serious felony.
So let me just clarify here, just for the sake of our listeners. Are you saying that there's a constituency within our state, elected, that is, that think it's relatively okay to sell a child for sex, but as long as you just don't perform it or beat the child or things of that nature?
Or create great bodily injury or torture or coerce or force. Yes, that would be the difference in making this bill this act of selling a child a serious felony, where you can go to prison and it create a strike. So you have to understand that we live in Democrat land in Sacramento, and I'm not saying negative things about all Democrats, because we have 60 plus co-authors, and the majority of them are Democrats. It's this particular group on the Public Safety Committee, specifically 3 of them. So this bill would create a serious felony. So right now it's 4, 8, and 12 years. Mm-hmm. So you sex traffic a minor child and you can be prosecuted, and at the fullest extent of the law you get 12 years right now. If you do your good time credits with criminal justice reform, you can be out in less than 4. If you get out in the state of California, even with my bill, and you become a productive member of society and you've learned your lesson, then my bill doesn't affect you in any way, shape, or form. If you go back out onto the street and you commit another serious felony like sex trafficking a minor again, then my bill creates a strike, and you will do 8, the double amount. So you'll do 8, 12, or 16. Excuse me, 8, 12, or 24. So it adds time, and they don't like the idea of adding time to anybody going to prison. Some of the comments in the Public Safety Committee were like, some of the comments in the Public Safety Committee were like, if you lock somebody up for a longer period of time, it doesn't help them. Well, sometimes it's just about justice and punishment for the victim.
Indeed. Yeah, exactly, and I think that's what the average American and the average Californian believes, regardless of party, at least I hope. And, we've definitely got some elected officials in Washington that mainly have a D behind their name that obviously don't see it quite like that. Let me ask you another quick question. Senator Shannon Grove is joining us today here on Politics in the Pulpit. Thank you again for joining us. I wanted to ask, was every Republican on board with this bill as well, or were there any abstentions?
Yes, no, I had every Republican as a co-author, and I had joint authors that were Democrats. So like I said, this is truly a bipartisan bill. It's just the left of the left of the left that stopped it in this Public Safety Committee hearing. But again, 48 hours later, 3 members that actually voted not to support the bill or voted abstained from the bill actually came on as co-authors.
Maybe you could explain or clarify.
48 hours later.
Yeah, maybe you could explain or clarify Governor Newsom's role in all this, because he came out a day later after the 6 abstained or didn't want to vote for this in the committee, and all of a sudden was, feigned outrage and said, "How dare you guys? You got to get this bill going." Is that legitimate on the part of the government, on the part of the governor, excuse me, or is he just looking at his future running prospects?
So, I can tell you that I got a call, and basically it was he conveyed disappointment about what happened. And the next thing you know, every media outlet in the world was talking about it, basically. And the world is an exaggeration. But I think, Brooke, we have done, there's been 300 or so articles or news media coverage on this particular situation in California. And he conveyed his disappointment. And within 24 hours of that situation of the governor conveying his disappointment in the decision, the speaker required the committee chair to meet with me, and then after that meeting they took the vote up the next morning. So I do think the governor had input on that. I have no doubt whatsoever in that particular situation. As far as his motives, it could be either one. It could be the fact that he has children and he understands that selling children for sex is not a good look for California, regardless of his political aspirations to be the next president.
Well, a lot more generous than I am, no doubt about that, Senator Shannon Grove. But let me also ask you this. I happen to be blessed to live in the 27th Congressional District, and thankfully we have an awesome congressman here, Mike Garcia, who is on the Intel Committee. And obviously he's got a lot to do with some of the fentanyl crisis and stuff like that in terms of trying to solve some of those issues. Was there any input at all from the congressman in reference to this issue with SB 14?
I don't believe so. I believe so. Obviously, my congressman is Congressman Kevin McCarthy, who wouldn't be in the position that he's in if it wasn't for an individual like Mike Garcia, who supported him for the speakership. And I know my congressman engaged because it was my bill. But as far as congressional members and the other part of the California congressional delegation, they didn't participate. I know if I probably would have reached out and called them, I don't think any one of them would have told me no. Again, I think Mike Garcia you are blessed to have representation from, number one, a man of God, and number two, a United States military veteran that understands what freedom means. And I love Mike Garcia, and I think he's just pretty incredible.
What are your thoughts going forward, Senator Shannon Grove, concerning our state, and how long do you think it'll take to really just turn it around in a good way?
So I think if we can mobilize the body of Christ, there's 15.8 million self-identified believers in this state, and I believe the last governor's election, Gavin Newsom got a little over 7 million votes. So I think if we can mobilize the body of Christ and engage people to actually vote and register to vote, and not just vote by party, but vote the person. And the reason why I say that is because if any church actively engaged and pastors were not fearful of losing nonprofit status, and they actually put, candidates at. This is just information we're providing to our congregants, right? John Doe is running for California State Assembly or the governor's office or whatever the case may be, and this is what he believes in, and this is his voting record or her voting record. Or you could put party platforms up. This is what the Democrat Party platform says. This is what the Republican Party platform says. But you can definitely provide constituents or congregants information when you go to church. I mean, Jack Hibbs is wonderful at that. He kind of he's a little bit bolder than other people are, but there are pastors out there that go, look, I'm not telling you who to vote for. The church isn't telling you who to vote for, but this person has a 100% voting record with Planned Parenthood and Equality California, and this person has a 20% voting record on jobs and economic security, and then this person over here has a 100% voting record with our pro-life council, marriage between a man and a woman, and also a 100% voting record on creating jobs in our economy and reducing our gas prices. You can provide people with information, and if we would do that, we could take back our state in a heartbeat.
I completely believe you. In fact, I think that's exactly what we need to do here in our state. And I think that every pastor, every congregation, specifically led by their pastor, needs to do exactly what you suggested. I'm thankful that for 21 years we've been trying to do just that here in Santa Clarita. And, of course, we're friendly with not only Congressman Garcia, but, of course, our local officials and others as well. And we are proud to have you to the north of us, Senator Grove, and we're glad that you are representing Kern County and those around with great leadership. And thank you so much for standing up for these who, in essence, were voiceless But now many of them have been rescued as of yesterday, and of course, hopefully, more and more of these types of victorious stories will come out over the course of weeks and months. So, thank you very much for standing up for these, and thank you so much for coming on today on Politics in the Pulpit.
Thank you. God bless you guys and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. All right, that was Senator Shannon Grove representing the wonderful Kern County area. And we are so glad to have her on. We'll get back to you right in just a few minutes here. We'll kind of wrap things up here on Politics in the Pulpit on your hometown station. All right, we're back here on Politics in the Pulpit on your hometown station. If you're just tuning in, we just got off the phone with former Senator Shannon Grove. We're thankful for her. Again, check out her bill, SB 14. We're glad that it is now law here in the state of California. And all we need now is just more Republicans and more sensible Democrats that'll stand alongside people like Senator Shannon Grove and others to pass laws that are sensible and are thinking about our constituency out there, the average individual standing on the sidewalk, walking down the sidewalk, shopping in the stores, as opposed to the criminals who, unfortunately, a large part of one particular party in our state happen to be thinking of far more than our wonderful California residents. At the top of the show, I was talking about former Vice President Mike Pence and if the Republican Party made the mistake of nominating somebody like Mike Pence, what that would do with the third or more of Republicans who are hardcore Trumpsters. Obviously, they would not vote for Mike Pence. And I'm going to give you a perfect example of what I mean by the type of Republicans that we cannot go back to as a Republican Party. I kind of went on a semi-rant about this last week, and when I saw Mike Pence and his statement about the latest Trump indictment, which came down yesterday, I said to myself, this is another reason why we cannot be nominating and voting for these country club type Republicans. And I'm just going to read this. It says, Mike Pence for president, Mike Pence statement on latest Trump indictment. It says, quote, Mike Pence today issued the following statement on the news of former President Trump's indictment. Today's indictment serves as an important reminder. Anyone who puts himself over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. And by the way, as far as I'm concerned, that I agree with that statement completely. Then he says this, I will have more to say about the government's case after reviewing the indictment. The former president is entitled to the presumption of innocence, but with this indictment, his candidacy means more talk about January 6th and more distraction. By the way, this statement goes on a little bit more and it gets a little heavier. But here is Mike Pence putting out a statement and he hasn't read the indictment. How about read the indictment and then make a statement? See, this is a reactionary Republican here as opposed to someone who is thinking through things. Now, that's not to say that Trump has never been reactionary. In fact, that's probably part of his appeal is the fact that he's on the reactionary side. And usually his reactions tend to be on spot on. Not all the time, but usually they tend to be spot on. But here's Mike Pence saying ostensibly at the end, I haven't read the indictment, but here's my opinion anyway. And folks, if you've read the indictment, which you can read online, essentially all that Jack Smith is going to try to do here with the strong arm and the money of the federal government behind him is he has essentially made the First Amendment the problem. Former President Trump believes that something happened during the 2020 elections. Former President Trump believes that Joe Biden did not get, 8 or 9 million more votes or 7 million more votes than Trump did. He doesn't believe that Biden, who didn't run at all during 2020, but was, hiding in the basement, how could he win more than Obama? I mean, Obama, prior to Trump winning 75 million votes in 2020, was the highest sitting president to have won that many votes other than former President Obama did in 2009. And so Trump is just looking at this thing going, how in the world can this geriatric individual who can't put a syllable together, who brought out 20 to 30 people to rallies, whereas Trump was bringing out thousands of people to rallies who were waiting in line to get into his rallies, how can this guy who is not out in the public using the cover of COVID to ostensibly allow the media and his lackeys to go out there and, basically run the campaign for him, how does that guy win, 81 million votes? Now, I do have a theory, and this, of course, might not sit well with some of my Trump friends out there, but either Donald Trump lost the election of 2020 by 7 million votes in terms of the majority vote, obviously. And not only did he lose the majority vote, but he lost the state-by-state vote when it came to the electoral count. But either he lost by 7 million votes, majority, or Donald Trump is that hated on one side of the aisle that it just brought out more votes than usual. In other words, they weren't voting because they liked Biden. They were voting because they loathed Trump. I think a little bit of that truth plays out in 2016. I think there were a lot of people who voted for Trump not because they loved him, but because they loathed the opposite choice, which would be Hillary Clinton. So it's very possible that that could also be what was played out in 2020. And again, I'm not asking my Trump supporters out there to persecute me and put me on a cross. I'm just trying to think this thing through. Either he won that election fair and square, or he was so loathed by the other side. There's no doubt that Trump brings out passions on both sides. If you are a hardcore Trump supporter, it doesn't matter what he does, you're going to support him. And if you're a hardcore Democrat who cannot stand Trump, then you're going to vote for a broom handle if it is running for president. And that's ostensibly who we have in office right now, is a broom handle, and not a very good one. Well, thank you for tuning in today to Politics in the Pulpit. We will be joined next week by Alexander Haberbush with the Lex Rex Institute. Got some interesting news today about Alexander. I'm not able to share it with you right now, but Lord willing, next Wednesday we'll be able to either hear from Alexander or an attorney from the Lex Rex office to talk about some interesting things in reference to the January 6th and the election interference of 2020. We'll catch you next week here on Politics in the Pulpit on your hometown station, 98.1 FM and AM 1220. Catch you later.